This is Insight. In a moment, we'll hear from London's first Muslim mayor. But first, here's some other stories we think you should keep an eye on. In Japan, they're in shock after the attack at a care centre for people with disabilities in which 19 people were killed. The incident is the worst mass killing in decades in the country, partly down to the fact Japan has such strict gun laws, meaning very few people have access to firearms. Zika is rarely far from the headlines. Now, the first reported case in Europe of a baby being born with the brain disease microencephaly. It's unlikely to be the last, with a report in the science journal Nature Microbiology suggesting that more than 90 million will catch the virus, including around 1.65 million pregnant women. And Solar Impulse, the solar-powered plane, has completed its journey around the world. It's been called the future and broke 19 records on the way round. But it was vulnerable to bad weather, had problems with its batteries, and it took more than a year. So the future is a while off yet. A series of armed attacks have brought concerns right across Europe and left those in charge of major cities with major questions as to how to protect their citizens. London's new mayor is Sadiq Khan, who this week called a meeting to discuss the potential threat. Well, I went to speak to him about terror, leaving the EU and keeping Londoners safe. The new mayor of London greeting friends and colleagues at the Association of Muslim Police Eid celebration dinner. They welcome his recent election, but realise he faces huge challenges. Keeping the citizens of a modern European city safe is the #1 task of the authorities. And here in the City of London, that's the #1 challenge facing the brand new mayor, Sadiq Khan. How he wants to keep everyone in London safe and how he wants to make his police force more effective, we're about to learn.
Just days after drummer Lee Rigby was brutally murdered in 2013, the Somalian Bravanese community, their Islamic centre, was burnt down in a racist arson attack in North London. After this attack, graffiti praising the EDL was found on a nearby building. The congregation had nowhere to pray. In response, this local synagogue in Finchley opened its doors to the community to offer a space for Muslims to come together and pray during the month of Ramadan.
Sadiq Khan went on to welcome interfaith cooperation in his initial meetings, not only with Muslim groups, but also Christians and Jewish faith organisations. When we spoke, I asked whether he understood the fear gripping communities after recent attacks, such as the one in Nice.
You look at last year in Brussels and Paris, you look in Istanbul, you look at Nice. What these have in common is people trying to divide our communities, people trying to cause terror, terrorising communities. Look, we are a great city, but we must never be complacent. One of the first things I did as mayor was to order a review to make sure we can counter any attack on our city. We've got to make sure that the public's got confidence to report anything they think is suspicious. We've got to make sure the things that are great about our city carry on being great.
Following the Brexit vote, Mr Khan urged Londoners to stand guard against hate crime and hate thinking. He told me it's a big challenge, and not one just confined to the UK.
What's really important is we have a zero-tolerance attitude towards hate incidents, whether it's name-calling, which may appear trivial, to verbal abuse, to criminal damage, which can lead to violence. If you allow name-calling to go unchallenged, it can lead to things turning into violence and criminal damage very shortly. I'm afraid there has been an increase in racial incidents post-Brexit.
One of the British phenomena you alluded to in your speech you've just given was the British nature can be just quite stoical. Oh, don't make a fuss. You're actually saying to people, do the opposite, make a fuss. That's quite a big change.
There's a great British tradition, one where we don't simply tolerate difference, we respect it, we embrace it, we celebrate it. And this is why London is the greatest city in the world, we're the greatest country in the world. We are the most diverse city in the world. Part of that is being able to be who you are. Whatever colour you are, whatever ethnicity you have, whatever religion you belong to, whatever faith you have. And it's really important you can be yourself. If somebody else is stopping you being yourself and acting in a criminal manner, report it. We're here to help.
You talked about the faith communities, not just your faith, but Christianity, Judaism and so on. What about for those of no faith? which is quite a large proportion of our population these days. Do they hear that message?
Absolutely. It's really important if you're a member of an organised faith or not a member of any organised faith, whether you're black, white, rich, poor, gay, lesbian, old, young, you feel that this city is your city, you can be who you are. It's really important that people have a sense of belonging. It's a state of mind. It's a state where you welcome others, and we're going to carry on being a great city.
Well, to discuss the challenges facing those running capital cities and keeping their citizens safe, I'm joined in the studio by the former Chief Superintendent of London's Metropolitan Police, Dal Babu. Thanks for being with us. Are Londoners safe today?
I think Londoners are safe. The big difference between what's happened in some of the European countries is that gun laws are very strict in this country, and thankfully it's very, very difficult to get a gun. That makes a huge difference. We have seen in Nice how people will use other things like a truck as a weapon. But I think we're a much more tolerant country than some of the other places around the world. If you look at what's happening in America at the moment, not particularly pleasant when you hear what Trump is saying about minorities. So I think we should celebrate the fact that we are a diverse capital, we are a diverse country, and we have levels of tolerance.
But you see, it's not just guns, as the terrorists or individuals in France have proved. A vehicle can be a weapon in these days of terror attacks, and that's alarming, isn't it?
It is, and I think what's worrying is just how much damage was caused by that, and it's a horrific attack. People celebrating Bastille Day and out there enjoying themselves, and this individual just mowed down, killed in excess of 80 people. It's horrific. So I think we can't be complacent, but the fact that we don't have guns makes a huge difference. What we need to do is make sure that people are confident in making sure that they can come to tell the authorities, tell people in authority if they have any concerns about individuals, and those individuals will be dealt with firmly and severely.
Well, you think we are more likely in the United Kingdom to find someone who is mentally ill, to find someone who's been radicalised, and their presence, their intent will become known to the authorities? Is that really likely?
I think we're more. I think we have a much more open society where professionals will look at individuals. I think the danger is that one of the key components of the government strategy of countering terrorism is prevent, and unfortunately prevent, which is that element of getting communities engaged, hasn't worked particularly well. And I think if there was a flaw in the government's wider strategy around counter-terrorism, it would be around prevent. So prevent is basically where individuals are encouraged to come forward. Unfortunately, the communities don't have trust.
And that has failed, spectacularly failed.
Oh,
have any effect, doesn't it?
Well, it is a failure because communities don't trust the prevent strategy. And I think the sad thing...
Maybe they don't trust the police.
Yes, and that's part of the challenge at the moment. The police don't reflect the communities that they serve. And Sir Robert Peel, when he started the Metropolitan Police in 1829, said the communities of the police of the community. There is not a single non-white chief constable across the whole of the country. There is a handful of senior officers at high rank. At my rank, chief superintendent, I think there's about 15. Out of 140,000. So I think if you look at the figures, we don't reflect the community doesn't reflect the police service.
But police officers are professionals, whatever city they work in, whatever country they work in, and they should be professional enough to be able to look after any community, however mixed or of one particular colour or race or creed, shouldn't they? Why does it matter, do you think, that the local police force should better reflect the society they look after?
Well, you're right. Police officers shouldn't have any favour whatsoever, regardless of who they're policing. You know, whether it's male, female.
In theory.
Well, that's the reality. I mean, hopefully that's what happened. And certainly my experience was that we have a lot of very, very able professional police officers that will do that. I think it's when you start looking at the issues around language, it's about culture, it's about understanding people of different faiths, people of no faith. I think all of those things, Sadiq mentioned in your piece there, are very, very important. So it's absolutely important that, when I was a police officer, I went to a domestic violence instance. I was able to speak to the woman in Urdu, and I was able to understand what was actually happening. She couldn't speak English. I was able to make sure that she was kept safe. So it's about making sure you're able to do your job better in a more professional way when you're able to have that understanding, that cultural understanding, and also that language understanding. And it goes back to what we heard right at the beginning of 1829, the public of the police of the public. If you don't have that, people were shocked to find out that we police largely without guns. It's about consent, it's policing by consent.
I understand that, but the frightening fact is about terror. It could strike at any time, in any town or city, anywhere in the world, it would seem. And even those police officers who are fully armed are not really able to do much about it. And if you're minded to be terrified by that, it's a pretty frightening prospect, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the individuals that have been involved in terrorism, we have a 13-year-old boy that was coordinating a beheading in Australia. This 13-year-old was in England. You have junior doctors, sort of consultant doctors in Glasgow, who were involved in terrorism. So you have a wide spectrum of individuals. You have people who have no faith, people who have faith, people who are converts, people from different parts of the world. You know, if you look at Irish terrorism, the way that worked, you know, and the anniversary we've had of the Birmingham bombings, where individuals were slaughtered without any knowledge, without any a mention of what was happening. You know, so unfortunately, the nature of terrorism is to cause fear. I think we have to make sure that we work with the communities, we don't tarnish individual communities, we don't lose the confidence of those communities, but we work with those communities in order to ensure that when any information comes forward, those communities have the confidence with the authorities to be able to share that information and stop and deal with the individuals who are terrorists.
Dal Babru, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Now, we end the programme with Insight Bite, a little something that we feel you ought to know. New research says watching too many TV box sets are bad for your health, seriously bad for your health. Apparently, it raises the risk of dying from a blood clot in the lungs. A Japanese team studied the viewing habits of more than 86,000 people between 1988 and 1990, and then kept monitoring them for 19 years. The researchers found that for every additional 2 hours of viewing each day, the risk of having a fatal pulmonary embolism increased by 40%. Now, the scientists say, and they come from Osaka University, by the way, to minimise the risk, you should stand up, stretch, walk about, and have a glass of water every hour. For us, we reckon you should keep watching Insight. And that's it from us. I'm Martin Stanford, and that was Insight.